But Psalm chapter 46, let's go ahead and read starting in verse 1. The Bible says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends or the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Father, we thank you for your abundant provision, for your protection. We thank you for being our fortress, our refuge, our strength, our very present help. We thank you for your sovereign power. We worship you this morning. Prepare our hearts and open us to receive what you would teach us today. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm probably like most of you this past week. I think for all of us, we just tried to figure out how to do the most basic things most of the week. It's just the kind of week it was, unless you're one of those with a very powerful generator and plenty of gas to power that generator. Most of us spent the week trying to figure out how to do basic things. Last weekend, for most of us, for me and my family, it was all about access to power. I woke up on Friday morning and about 6:30, and I realized immediately that we had no power. It must have had just gone out, I guess. And the reason that I knew that is because everything in the house was very quiet. There was no white noise, nothing like that. It was just quiet. And the only sounds that we could hear were the things that were happening outside. And so we spent the better part of Friday and Saturday just trying to figure out how to keep our devices charged and try to figure out, this is me, I'll confess, nobody else in my family, but where to get a cup of coffee, tried to figure out how to keep the meat in the freezer from going bad, which we had just gotten a big box of pork and brisket and stuff from one of our very kind church members, and I just put that in our freezer that week and just trying to figure out how to save all those things. And so Friday, when the storm was mostly over, maybe just a little bit of drizzle, maybe foolishly decided to go out and drive around and sort of survey what was happening and really just see if I could find a cup of coffee and if anything was open. And so we went out and just navigated around all the downed trees and the power lines and made our way down 11 to the new temporary lake down by the old ball field. If you drove by there at all on Friday, you saw it just really flooded out right there. And eventually we made our way to the Circle K there on 11 and 26, along with the rest of the northern part of Spartanburg County, where that was pretty much the only gas station open at the time. And we found out they had gas and they had power. And very importantly for me, they had coffee. And so I got a cup of coffee and a little bit of food and something to drink. And then we spent Friday, we went to Hare and the Hound on Friday, somehow the only place that stayed open in all of Landrum that day. They spent a lot of money on generators, I guess, on Friday. But went and had dinner there and then went back to the house and just had a very quiet night in a dark house with nothing but flashlights and decorative candles. That's how we spent Friday. But by Saturday, things started to get a little bit more frantic because we started to realize that this is not going to be one of those normal kinds of situations. This wasn't going to be just your normal run-of-the-mill power outage that was real temporary, going to be back to normal pretty quick. We realized that more was to come in front of us. And so we started having to think through things like medical supplies and keeping, things charged for Jack so that he could have a pump, and making sure that our insulin stayed cool there. And then, of course, continuing to know that we still had that meat in the freezer. And so on Saturday, we just decided, we had heard there was more in Greenville than there was here. And so we just started driving, and we drove out to Greenville and eventually made our way to Pelham Road, and went into Pelham Road and found Panera Bread open over there on Pelham. And again, everybody in Greer, I think, also discovered that. But we went to the Panera, and we sat there for about 3 hours waiting for 2 very small sandwiches and a cup of coffee. That was what kind of morning it was. But it was okay, because it wasn't just waiting. Everything changes when you're in a situation like that, right? So normally 3 hours to get 2 little tiny sandwiches would have me ready to go Incredible Hulk on the place or something. It's just like, I don't like to wait like that. And so, but that day was okay, because they had power outlets there, and they had Wi-Fi there. And so we plugged all our stuff up, and we started charging up all our devices, and we, sat and drank coffee, and then we began to look on the internet. And it was at that point when we realized just what kind of extent, we had not had internet the whole previous day. From about 9 o'clock that Friday morning on, we had no access to that. And so we're starting to see some of the stuff that's coming out here. And we started seeing some of the footage from places that we're very familiar with, places that are not, many times you hear about hurricane damage or tornadoes or destruction, and you think these are things that happen in other places. They're not things that really hit us here, but these are places we know. We saw some of that footage from Chimney Rock. I think that was the big thing for all of us. I spent so much time in Chimney Rock growing up, and at Lake Lure, and just seeing what had happened there, and seeing what had happened in on 40, that 40 just simply collapsed. A big portion of it just collapses into the river. It's a road that we'd spent the better part of 10 years driving back and forth on, going up to Knoxville to visit my brother, and that many of you went up dozens and dozens of times to go to Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg and Dollywood and wherever else that we go up in that direction. We watched all of that take place, and we began to hear these horrible reports of flooding in the mountains, and just wiping homes out, and taking people off, and having people that watched their whole families just be whisked away in the flood. And we began to hear stories and reports of limbs and trees falling on property and causing damage, and falling on people and causing death, and all of this stuff. And to make the whole situation worse, I think for us especially, but for everybody, it was just this complete lack of ability to connect with people, in that time. That we weren't consistently able to reach out, that you'd have no phone service anywhere around here, that our internet didn't work here, that there was no connectivity with the outside world, and that the frustrating part would be, even if you would get to a place where you had cell phone service, it's pretty likely the person you were trying to call would not also be in that same place. And so you just feel lost, and you feel very cut off. And for a lot of people, I'm confident, a lot of people just felt alone. And the whole thing is just this intense feeling of helplessness. I think the best way to describe it is out of control. It's like everything felt so out of control. And the reason that it felt that way is because it was out of control. But most of us, that's hard for us, because most of us live under the impression that we can control, that people can control, that we can control anything and everything. Like there's nothing that we can face that just a little bit of human ingenuity cannot master. Think about our world now. Like we want to master and control everything. We control the dark with electricity. We control the rivers with dams. We control connectivity with fiber optic cables and satellites in space. We control where we can go with cars and paved roads and asphalt. We control our health with medicine and doctors and hospitals. We control access to food because we have grocery stores, and we just know that those grocery stores are always going to have the things that we need, even if they're sometimes out of what we want. It's just we are in control. And then something like this happens. We go, all of our amazing technology, we can pinpoint, and I didn't follow the news last week, but if I had, I would have discovered that we can pinpoint the origination of a hurricane. We know where it's going to start. We know when it's going to start. We know roughly the track and the path that the storm is going to take. We know the timing of it. We know all of these things. We can tell people the storm is coming. You need to be ready. And then it gets here, and everybody just watches as that storm follows the same path that we were told, roughly the same path that all of us were told it was going to follow, but we watch it. And that's all we can do because there is nothing we can do about it, right? That's the helpless part. That we know it's coming, but there's not a single thing that we can do to stop it. And at that moment you realize that for all of our technology is useless in the face of a hurricane. All of our infrastructure is useless in the face of a flood. And you go, our civilization, our entire civilization is held together by this small, thin, tiny little thread. And when that thread snaps, it is amazing how fast things can fall apart. Now you have gas stations with no gas. You have grocery stores with no groceries. You have devices and nothing to power them. You have roads that are blocked with trees or in some cases just completely swept away. You have phones that can't do anything more than tell you what time it is if they're charged. You have medicines but no pharmacies open to give you the medicines. You have police, but how about this? No 911. And now all of us have just spent a portion of the week the way that the overwhelming majority of human history spent it. And you need to understand in this that it's not that events like this make us out of control. It's not like we were in control before and then this happened and now we're not. Like what we just experienced is this really sort of temporary setback to our control, and we're eventually going to get things back the way that we had it before. No, this is not a temporary setback. This hurricane, this is a revelation. It's an unveiling of what was always true, but what stays hidden in the good times. You know that the good times hide our lack of control. It's like when things are smooth and operating the way that we think they're supposed to operate, it's like there's this veil that goes over our eyes that gives us the illusion that we have some kind of power as people to take charge of our life and charge of our world. But then when something like this happens, that veil that covered our eyes is completely ripped away in a hurry. And now you look with your eyes open and you go, oh my goodness, 3 days of rain in a tropical storm completely reshaped the entire region of the world that we're in. And that's all at the big level, right? That's all big societal level stuff. We watch things break down around us, and it's horrifying how fast that happens, how fast things can change for the worse. Like 1 week, and a lot of people, their whole world is different. But it's just as true, not just at the societal level, it's just as true at the personal level. It's just as true in your life. How fast can your life change? How fast can your world just get flipped upside down? What would it take in your life to flip your world upside down? For some of you, it was just this week. But it can happen just that fast. One phone call from the doctor after that test. 1 quarter of not meeting your quotas. I don't know. 1 bad report card, 1 big argument with your spouse, 1 big whatever. Think about in your life, what's that one thing that if it happened or if it didn't happen would just turn your world upside down? That's life. And so if you look around, you see this play out. You watch people lining up at gas stations all the way down the highway. You watch them raiding grocery stores, picking it clean. You watch people sitting outside restaurants, charging their devices. getting more desperate and more desperate day by day. And what you're seeing when you're watching all this happen, people desperately trying to regain that control in an out of control situation. Isn't that what we do? That's what all of us do. We fight to keep control in our lives, in our world, and then when we feel like we lost it, we fight to get it back again. And that's what some of you are doing right now in your life. Beyond hurricane recovery, you are fighting to regain what you thought you lost. You are fighting to get the control back in your life that you think at some point in time you lost. You're fighting to get back control of your marriage. You're fighting to get control of your kids and your job and your finances and your whatever it is. You're fighting and you're fighting. And sometimes we get these brief moments where it feels like maybe we've got it back in our hands again, only to lose it again. But I want you to hear me on this. I've said it before. I'll say it again. You never lost control. You never had it. You didn't lose control. You didn't have it. You just thought you had it. And that could sound depressing if you're not prepped for it. If you're not ready to hear that, if you're not ready to see that, that sounds very depressing, but that is the exact reason why I am so thankful for this psalm, because this psalm speaks into our out-of-control world and into our out-of-control lives with this really beautiful message, and it's this. This world is not out of control. I know it feels like it in times like this. I know it seems like sometimes that we're all just like hurling through space, however fast that's happening on this big globe that's just spinning around while it travels through space, and that all the things that happen just kind of random. It's all physics, it's all geology, it's all meteorology, it's all whatever ology you want to put it on. It's all just happening. It's all just the world doing what the world does. But I want you to know that's not true. The world is not out of control, but it is out of our control. And the message of this psalm is when the world feels out of control, we can rest easy knowing God is still in control. That's what the sons of Korah who wrote this, that's what they're singing about here. If you pay attention to the text, what you notice is there's a lot of turmoil and trouble that are being described here. You see natural disaster. One of the reasons I was drawn to this is because of the description you see in 46 of natural disaster happening. You have the earth giving way. You have mountains quaking and trembling and falling into the sea. Or if you're in North Carolina, you have the mountains falling into the river and into the lakes, like Lake Lure. You have raging floodwaters that are just sweeping things up as they travel. Down a little bit further, in verse 6, you move on from natural disaster happening to the turmoil of nations and kingdoms. You have nations raging against nations. You have kingdoms trembling and tottering. You think about what's happening now in our world. Shared this Wednesday night. At the same time, all of this is happening here. You have what's going on in the Middle East right now with Israel. You have Russia. You have Ukraine going on. You have kingdoms trembling. And we're wondering, all of us are wondering, are we about to plunge into another world war? Is that what we're on the brink of after how unimaginable the first two were? Like, did we learn nothing? We're going to get back into this again? Like, this is the only way we can do it. We can't solve our problems any other way but this. Who wins with this? No one. Not us. So you have the natural disaster. You have the political turmoil, and it all just feels so unstable. When it talks about kingdoms being shaken or trembling and tottering and mountains shaking or trembling and tottering, it's this picture of it feeling very unstable and out of control. But that's like the dark part of the message. There is a bright side. And the bright side is this. The turmoil that you see in the middle here, that's sandwiched by these two beautiful statements about God that surround this passage. There in verse 1, it tells us that God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. We've been in trouble. We're in trouble. People are in trouble now. What is an inconvenience for us is earth-shattering for people in Western North Carolina right now. Trouble, there's disconnectedness, there's a defenselessness, there's turmoil that it seems like is just sort of spilling into every crack in life. But he said, we have a strong refuge. I love this thought because having a refuge doesn't take away the trouble. You know that, don't you? Having a refuge doesn't take the trouble away. Refuge is the place that you run to in the trouble. That when you get there, the trouble's still out there, but you have found your safe place. Well, a lot of people were looking for refuge this past week, and they couldn't find it. And the place they thought they would find it turned out not to be a refuge. Their homes turned out to not be a refuge. The roads were not a refuge. There was nowhere for a lot of people to go looking for refuge, but not finding it. But what is so beautiful here in this is we don't have to find the refuge. This says the refuge finds us. Because right here, the refuge, it's not a place, it's a person. What's the refuge in Psalm 46? It's God. God is the refuge. And if you notice what it says he's a very present help. He's already here. He's always been here. I love that. There's so many people looking for refuge. With God, you don't look for the refuge. What he says is look to it. We look to the refuge. And then on the other end, this is the other slice of bread there around all this turmoil in this passage. Verse 11 says, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. You get this one more reminder. God is with us. Doesn't matter what's going on. God is with us. Doesn't matter what turmoil is out there, what trouble is out there, whatever is going on in life. So God is with us. It says the Lord of hosts is with us. What does that mean? It's like a military term. It's like a general, a commander, a captain of the armies of heaven saying God is in absolute control. You need to know this. God is in absolute control of forces and powers that are infinitely more powerful than any armies that we might muster, any storms, any winds, any waters, any hurricanes, anything. This speaks here to the strength and to the might of the Lord. And what it's telling us is that there is nothing that is more powerful than God. No kingdoms, no natural disaster, no nothing can stop God when he decides to take action. Do you believe that today? Did you come here believing that God is sovereign over this world? That God is the king of all things, that he has the right of rule over all things. This text says, at his word, verse 6, the earth melts. At his word, verse 9 says, the weapons of war are shattered and burned. At his word, wars cease to the ends of the earth. God's in control. And he is guiding this world. He's guiding us, his people, through the turmoil of the world. He's guiding us through the turmoil that pops up in our lives. He's leading us towards his greater purposes. And now what are those greater purposes? What's the greater purpose that God is working all things together for? It tells us in 10, it says that he's exalting his name among the nations and in the earth. And notice that's a promise, isn't it? He said, I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And so again, what you see, trouble in the middle, turmoil in the middle, but we're encircled and surrounded by the fortress to run into. Well, if you look, you'll see there's only really 2 commands in the whole chapter. What do we do in times of turmoil and trouble? What does this passage tell us? 2 things. Number 1, we behold. It's verse 8. He says, "Come, behold the works of the Lord." Natural disaster, turmoil in the nations, turmoil in your life. What do I do? Where do I turn? Where do I focus my attention, my gaze, my heart? He says, "Come, behold the works of the Lord." What is that? It's like, come and look in awe. Come and marvel at the works of God. Come and marvel at God's power. Marvel at God's control. Marvel at how the nations are nothing compared to Him. At how nature is nothing compared to Him. That nature itself will bow down and worship and praise the God who created this world, this universe, that heavens will declare and are declaring the glory of God. He says, come and behold that. Look at that. I know it's devastating, but don't just get fixated on the turmoil and the trouble and the devastation. He said, come and behold the works of the Lord. That's number 1. What do you do in times of trouble? Behold the works of the Lord. Number 2, second command is in verse 10. And so far, the whole text, this is very interesting. It's all been the sons of Korah speaking. And it finishes with the sons of Korah speaking. But in verse 10, we get a change of perspective. We get a new speaker that comes in. Now you have God Himself stepping in to speak. In the midst of all the trouble, in the midst of all the turmoil, you have God's voice thundering into this passage. And what does He tell us? What does God's voice tell us in the midst of trouble? To do, not just behold. He says, be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I'm God. What does that mean? I think we mistake what this command is a lot of times. We look at it like, life is noisy and I just need to go get quiet. Life is noisy. I need to go find a quiet place to get away and just maybe kind of think about God for a little bit. Like all it's telling us to do maybe is just to go have a quiet time or something. But that's not what this is. That's not what this command is. It's not just quiet the noise and get away where you can think about God. No, what this is telling us is God is telling us. God is speaking here. God is saying, listen, man, I'm in control. And so you can rest easy. I'm in control. And so you can stop fighting to be in control. Right? Didn't we already agree that's what we do? Life gets out of control. We desperately fight to regain that sense of control. When He says, be still and know that I'm God, He is saying, stop fighting to be in control. And that is the message for us today. It's not, I know it's all out of control right now. I know it's been a rough week. I know we felt like we're in this helpless place, but hey, don't worry. We got this. We're human. We can do it. We can overcome. We'll bounce back. We can get past any obstacle that comes our way. No, that is all just our typical mindset of arrogance in the midst of this. Now, we have much to do. The punchline is not go sit in your house and let God bring you everything you need. That's not what He's saying. Right. You do that, you don't eat. You do that, you don't have power. You do that, you don't have access to the, we have work to do, much work to do. But the message here is we work, but we rest in His control. In all our labor, every time we lift our hands, every time we take a step, we are working from a place of rest in His sovereign control and power. And so in this, and this week, and the weeks to come, in your life, and everything that's going on, understand that all of the striving, all of the fighting for control in the world and in your life is ultimately futile. That's the lesson that something like this teaches us if we'll listen to it. So listen and learn what the lesson is from the storm. Don't go back. We want to return to normal. I'm with you. But don't go back to that normal. Don't go back under the illusion again